All right, we're going to discuss, hopefully briefly, because I have to go to bed, but what's been going on lately with the Canada, Mexico, and USA trade deals. Now, apparently, they have decided to create what will be called the USMCA agreement, United States Mexico Canada agreement. I don't know why they had a problem with my idea of the Canada US Mexico agreement or CUM agreement, but I'll let somebody else answer for me. Um, the real problem with this right now is that I'm sure that there's going to be more details hammered out, and we're going to have to figure out exactly who benefits and why. But there's one group of people that I think will be pretty, at least somewhat pleased by it, and that's U.S. dairy farmers because apparently the Canadian dairy farmers are pissed off. It says Canadian dairy farmers say the renegotiated deal with the U.S. to replace NAFTA could lead to hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue for producers. The newly minted United States-Mexico-Canada agreement provides the U.S. with access to about 3.6% of Canada's dairy market and gets rid of a controversial domestic milk pricing class. So I didn't know that. The leader of a Canadian dairy trade group says the new trade pact was a sign that Canada's dairy farmers are nothing more than a bargaining chip to satisfy President Trump. So I don't think the 3.6% access to Canada's dairy market is really. Hold on, let me put this display up. Sorry, guys. The new deal, to be called the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, grants the U.S. an expanded 3.6% access to Canada's dairy market and gets rid of a controversial domestic milk pricing class Ottawa had previously defended. President Donald Trump has been critical of Canada's protectionist dairy policies, blasting them as not fair to our farmers and harmful to milk producers in Wisconsin and other border states. The announced concessions on dairy in the new USMCA deal demonstrates once again that the Canadian government is willing to sacrifice our domestic dairy production when it comes time to make a deal, said Pierre Lampron, president of Dairy Farmers of Canada, a trade group representing the producers. The government has said repeatedly that it values a strong and vibrant dairy sector. They have once again put that in jeopardy by giving away more concessions. So I'll say this, okay? Well, let me see here. It says the dairy concessions also led to some calls on social media for a boycott of imported U.S. dairy products. Some also wondered if they will even know what. So I mean, does that not mean that if they're gonna boycott our products, then well, why would we want to buy Canadian shit? We'll boycott your maple syrup. Okay, this was an agreement, and if people are bent out of shape about it, then I'm sorry, but I do have a different solution if people would want to entertain it. Not that I think it's kind of too late, but let's say some also wondered if they will even know whether the dairy products are made locally or in the U.S. Canadian dairy producers are currently labeled with country of origin, but sometimes in very small print. They actually, this is CNBC actually cited somebody named Scattergirl. Let's see who that is. Scattergirl. Didn't even look at this before. Yeah, it's just some random Twitter user, some random anti-Trump Twitter user. So, so CNBC cited them. Anyone out there know if U.S. dairy products entering Canada with new NAFTA deal will be identified as such, or will they simply be incorporated in the packaging we are familiar with and unable to trace coming from U.S.? I plan to boycott U.S. dairy products, but I need to identify them. Canada purchased nearly $636 million worth of U.S. dairy products last year, according to the U.S. Dairy Export Council. Mexico is the largest single market for U.S. dairy exports in 2017, representing 1.31 million products, particularly cheeses. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sounded a cautionary note about the new trade agreement in remarks Monday, saying that the deal still needs to be ratified in Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., but what I can say is, Free trade in North America, a trading zone that accounts for more than 1/4 of the world's economy with just 7% of its population, is in a much more stable place than it was yesterday. We now have a path forward. And now they've killed this thing called Class 7. So the Canadian federal government offered dairy farmers compensation, but some producers were skeptical it would be helpful, and also suggested they didn't want a handout from the federal government. Weens, the Manitoba dairy farmer, predicted the new trade deal will end up costing dairy producers significant revenue losses. We know the loss to the Canadian industry will be at least $240 million. It's not even calculating the losses we will have with the ending of the Class 7 policy, he said. He said killing Class 7 will make it impossible for us to export any protein-based dairy products. So I have an idea here. And I'd like to hear your opinion, whether you're Canadian, American, or Mexican. Why is it that these trade deals regarding particular industries necessarily have to be made by national governments? Why can't we just say, if the Canadian dairy industry is so bent out of shape, but American dairy producers want to be able to produce in Canada, shouldn't they have? Why not have the negotiation happen between people in the same industry? Why is it even that you need Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau, who have never seen the bottom side of a cow in their life, probably, unless Trump did it for some sort of stunt on The Apprentice or something? Why do they have to be the ones who are negotiating it? I would say that in many cases, if these people would try to resolve these things within their industry, as opposed to demanding protections from their own government that end up leading to trade friction, these things wouldn't happen. And instead, you're going to have these people are going to be so bent out of shape that it's actually going to end up helping Trump. Trump doesn't care if these Canadian dairy farmers are pissed off. They don't care at all. So some people are comparing this to the TPP, and I'll have to study this a lot more as we keep following this. But I do believe that we will see a number of changes to this policy. But in the meantime, this is kind of a PR war between Trump and some of the Canadian people. Now you have the Business Insider, which is, I guess, let me see here. So they ran this story where Trump reportedly told donors Canada's chief NAFTA negotiator hates America days before sealing the new trade deal. Well, this is a woman who apparently went to Germany during the meat of the Trump negotiations with Mexico, and started talking, basically virtue signaling about how important it was to keep relations with Germany, and that it was more important to have alliances with countries that share the same values. And the fact is that she's also let me see here, Chrystia Freeland. I know that there was a story with this. Okay, here we go. This is something that she had said.
Last week, when President Trump decided to withdraw from the Paris climate change agreement, I said the move symbolized that the United States was essentially retiring from its role as global leader. I was intrigued this week to hear somebody essentially offer to take up that mantle. Chrystia Freeland is Canada's foreign minister, and in a very strong, important speech to her nation's parliament, she said Canada was deeply disappointed by the president's climate decision, although she didn't mention him by name, and provided a solution. Minister Freeland suggested the ways that Canada could step up its global leadership. She joins me now. Welcome.
Great to be with you, Fareed.
You spoke in the speech almost elegically about the important role America had played in creating and sustaining this open international order. But you think it's basically moved on, that America has withdrawn from the world?
It's not my job to make predictions, Fareed. I did say in my speech, and I mean this so sincerely, how grateful I am, how grateful Canada is for the tremendous role the United States has played over the past 70 years in building this rules-based liberal international order. And I think that, first of all, I think we maybe don't say that often enough to our American friends. And I also think that people of my generation, and perhaps yours, Fareed, we were lucky to be born into these 70 fat years. And I'm not sure we always fully appreciate what the peace and prosperity was that liberal, rules-based international order created, and the horror that came before it. And really, what I said to Canadians this week is, let's not take that for granted. As a country, we Canadians, we have to set our own sovereign course, and our course is to double down on that rules-based international order. We as Canadians helped to build it in the post-war period, and we are really committed as a country to doubling down, to help to renew it, to help to make it even stronger in the 21st century, doing things like bringing the great emerging powers, including China, in, and certainly, Fareed, doing things like being strongly committed to the Paris Accord and to fighting one of the great new menaces we're aware of today, which is climate change. So that's where Canada absolutely stands.
Why do you think there is such resonance for the idea of America first, of withdrawing from the world? I mean, there's always been an isolationist streak in the United States. You're a student of this, but you're also dealing with the political system in Canada. Do you feel that same pull where maybe working class people feel the system hasn't delivered for them recently, and so they just want to tear it down?
I think that is an excellent point, and I actually addressed domestic economic policy in my speech this week, which is not that usual for a foreign policy speech. But I really strongly agree with what you've said, Fareed. I think that the middle class here in Canada, as in many other Western industrialized countries, including the United States, is feeling hollowed out. It's feeling betrayed by this global economic order. And what I believe, what my government believes, what we say to Canadians is, it is not, blaming foreigners is always easy.
So essentially what you see there is she's first saying that, it's so great that we got into this situation where liberal international order and globalism made everything so great. But ultimately the middle class and everybody else feels screwed over by it. But we're still going to promote it and tell them to suck off when they oppose it. Well, this is really why I'm bringing this up, which is that I think that they decided to conclude this agreement because they're trying to prevent the hemorrhaging of votes from their party. Now, Friedland, on her Twitter feed, it seems like she got some pretty positive messages. Somebody asked, what did Canada actually get? Here's a good... So people are kind of digesting it. I don't know yet if there's going to... I don't know if there's really anything to conclude yet. Like I said, I think that the agreement will probably change several times. And then you have all these people saying, well, we're not going to drink U.S. milk. We'll see how that works out, buddy. In any case, yes, I think this is going to be a very big point of contention because, first of all, you have these two elections. Now, this one was in New Brunswick. New Brunswick, if you don't know, if you're an idiot like a lot of people are, and let's not hold it against you, New Brunswick is found between Quebec and, I believe, Nova Scotia on Canada's eastern seaboard. Now, this wasn't a huge wave, but you see the Liberals lost basically they had almost a majority, and they're going to have a struggle to keep control because they're going to be probably in an alliance with these Greens. So that's going to be 24 seats total. And then they might have to reckon with these conservatives allying with the People's Alliance. And, there could be an issue there where you have kind of a mild flip from the liberals to the conservatives. In fact, this People's Alliance is kind of a upstart group, and people were like, well, they were not. I'm not really focused on New Brunswick politics because it's not really that big of a province, even in Canada. But when they lose provinces on the eastern seaboard to the conservative side, it's a real problem. Now, a much bigger story than that is what happened in Quebec, where they basically got teabagged by these Quebecois. A lot of people say, I like saying Paraguay. A lot of these Americans like saying Ocasio-Cortez, but there's nothing more pretentious than saying Quebecois. And basically, the Liberals just bit the dust here. They had 68 seats out of a 125 seat parliament, and they've lost more than half of them to this more conservative group. Not quite as bad as their Ontario showing, but pretty bad still. And they're going to have basically a pretty solid majority. And this is from Montreal Gazette. Here's just how wrong the polls were. 3 end-of-campaign polls by Laguerre Ipsos, which, by the way, I think works with Reuters, and Main Street suggested Francois Legault's coalition Avenir. Fuck it. I'm not going to, it's their fucking law. The CAQ party had the support of about 32% of voters, with the Liberals not far behind at about 30%. The final tally shows the CAQ won 37% of the popular vote, and the Liberals just 25%. In other words, the gap between the two top parties was 12 percentage points, 10 more than had been suggested by these three polls. The polls were more accurate in gauging Quebec, so these two minor parties, I guess, had more accurate numbers. But what I would say is that this is evidence that some of the polling used in elections in North America is being tampered with. Whether it's in Canada or whether it's in various parts of the U.S., I believe it's being tampered with. I would say that in many cases they are either oversampling certain constituencies that they, whether it's in terms of demographics or whether it's in terms of people who are stated supporters of certain parties. They are oversampling people based on who they think is more enthusiastic, and it's going to bite them in the ass, because we're not talking about look, if you have a 2% to 3% discrepancy between polls and between one party and another in a country where there's proportional representation, I think that's okay. I don't think that's really a problem. When you're doing it in countries like the U.S., Canada, and Britain, where you're talking about first past the post, where every parliamentary seat or congressional district you're voting, everybody's voting for that for specific people, you're really running into like a real problem. And when you go to entire states, let's say you're talking about the state of, I don't know, Nevada, and you're polling the entire state about a statewide race, and you're oversampling or something, you're forgetting that these people are voting not just for that one top of the ticket race, whether it's senator, governor, or attorney general. They're voting for all of these people that are pissing them off at the bottom or voting against them. So I think that this is really an example of how the media and polling companies themselves they undermine their own credibility. If you make your polls inaccurate, and by this measure, these polls were inaccurate, a 5% discrepancy in a province-wide poll, I think is, well, actually it's a 10% technically. If you, it's 5% either way. That really shows that you're really out of touch, because it's 5% either way. Let's say it had only been a 2% gap. You would have conceivably seen the Liberal Party lose, let's say, half of the seats that they did lose, so that would be 18, and they'd move down to 50, and the Conservatives would let's say win 25 seats more, something like that, and then you would see some sort of balancing out on the other ones. So you would have had kind of minority government or something, so that would be something that would be acceptable. In this case, you're talking about a tectonic shift to one side. So I would say, that this trade agreement is kind of being made in anticipation of more troubles in Trudeau's government. He's really losing a lot of really the meat and bones of his so-called support base, because people are simply voting out his local captains, people like this Philippe Couillard, or whatever his name is, and putting in people that will probably be very opposed to his agenda. So anyway, if you're Canadian, please comment on the video. Let me know if there's a different detail that I did not cover, that you think might be important, or if you disagree with me, or if you think the trade agreement was good, or if it was bad, and or if you're from America or Mexico. There's certainly different points you could put in that I might have missed. So you can put those in the comments. Also, like the video, share the video, subscribe to my channel, and subscribe to my other channel, Razor Ray Live Wounds. We might have a chat tomorrow, actually, with somebody, but nothing sure. So I'll see you guys later.